How do you treat failures at work? And is this something that is actively sought out? Is it something that's brushed under the carpet? Is it something that, there's a lot of finger pointing? And I know I've worked certainly in companies where there's been a lot of finger pointing. You're watching the award winning Happier at Work podcast, which is the career and culture podcast for people first leaders. And my guest today is Kelly McDonald. And we talk in quite a roundabout way, but eventually start talking about failure at work and what it means to fail at work. We talk about the growth mindset and we talk about how to create and the benefits of having a safe environment where it's okay to fail. So do let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. I'd love to know what you think. What's one thing that you're going to take away? What's one thing that you're going to do differently as a result of watching today? Kelly, you're so welcome to the Happier at Work podcast. Do you want to give listeners a little bit of a flavour of who you are and how you got into doing what you're doing today?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm Kelly McDonald. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. I am a professional speaker and an author and a business consultant. I have been doing this for 22 years and I speak at conferences and corporate meetings, all kinds of places where people gather to exchange business ideas and business concepts on how to do better and be better. And that's kind of what my lane is. And I got into this because I was asked to speak at some conferences 23 years ago. And it went really, really well. And it was one of those things where I just did it, as a professional favor for someone. And then it just kind of like, I kept getting asked from that. And then I thought, I can make a living at this. And, I just sort of positioned myself as a business authority, especially in the areas of leadership, marketing, sales, customer experience, and people and culture. So that's me. And I'm a 4-time author.
Fantastic. I love that. They're all quite interrelated, those concepts as well. And I love how you've turned what was a professional favor into, oh, wait a minute, I actually quite enjoy this and I'm quite good at it too. So I can turn this into something that is a career, because I think with a lot of people, they get disillusioned with their corporate role and then they decide to go out and be like, I'm going to fix corporate. I'm going to change what's going on. But I love that you've done that. I'm curious about, my own background is in market research, so I'm curious about the marketing side of things. But I'm also curious about the customer experience and maybe the overlap between customer experience and workplace culture, because I think they're so related. Do you want to kind of talk about like what are the big things that you're seeing in either one of those areas and maybe how it relates to the other?
Oh, for sure. So just quickly, my books and my core topics and how I got going on this was talking about people not like you. Whether it was marketing and selling to people not like you or the customer experience for people not like you. And now from a work standpoint is how to work with and lead people not like you. And what I find is that it's very easy in business for people to default to people who are just like them, right? Selling the core customers that you get, you understand your customers, they understand you, everything's good. But how much bigger could your business be? How much larger, more successful, more profitable if you could get the customers that you're not getting, but you could be? Same thing with employees. Same thing with marketing and selling, right? Like tapping into new markets. It's the best way to grow business. You're already successful with whatever it is you're doing. So it's about expanding that and broadening that. And that's typically with people who are sort of outside your eyeball arena of the people that you serve. And what's happening in business right now is businesses have really realized that when they're the good guys, business grows. When they're just doing the right things and being the good guys, whether it's with exceptional customer experiences or, employee rights and employee culture and things like that, everything gets good, really good, because your products are your products and your pricing is your pricing. And typically your products are going to be at least as good a quality as your competitors. Your pricing is certainly going to be competitive. So the thing that's really differentiating one company from another, one brand from another, is how they treat their customers and their people and their culture internally. And that's what I like to talk about and work with people on and speak at conferences about, is how do you actually work on your culture internally and externally and grow your business that way, which is by far the best way. Just lowering your prices and having a sale, that's a race to the bottom. Somebody can always better your price. It's not a sustainable tactic. And there's research now, this has been talked about for a while, but there's research now out there that shows that from an employee standpoint, which goes to being happier at work, right? Employees have choices. I mean, there's a major demand for talent and getting the best people. So the employee is holding the reins. They have the options, the good people, and good people are always going to be in demand, and good people always have choices. They can go anywhere and get a job. And so what they're making their decisions on, importantly these days, is the culture of the organization. Obviously, the salary and the compensation needs to be competitive, but that's kind of a given. And in fact, there's research now that shows that employees are willing to take, in US dollars, $8,000 less for a position that has a good culture. And I was waiting for someone to research that, because we know that that's so important, but we were never able to quantify it and put a dollar amount on it. And $8,000 US is a lot. Yeah. So for someone willing to say, I'd rather take a $70,000 position where the culture is really good than a $78,000 position where the culture's okay, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a really interesting data point.
5,000 people. And, if you're looking for savings as well, just having that right culture. And I think from the employee's perspective, let's jump into their minds for a second. Sometimes you don't realize how good you have it. And I worked in a fantastic organization, well compensated and fantastic culture. And I didn't realize. Now, I left for personal reasons because I wanted to travel. That was the only reason that I left that organization. But I've subsequently been in other organizations where I'm like, wow, I had it really good in that other place. But I think people take for granted how amazing it is to work in a culture where you feel really valued, where you're recognized for the contribution, where you get along really well with your colleagues, where you have positive conflict, all of those really, really important things for creating happier working environments. I think people underestimate. And so if someone is offered, say, 10,000 more to move to another organization, and they get there and they're like, oh, but I'm earning 10K more. So, I'm winning here. You get there and realize, you look around and go, these people are not the people that I want to be with. This is not the environment that I want to be in.
You're absolutely right. And the money fades, like the money value of that fades if the culture isn't right. I mean, really, truly, it's I've been in those situations, and I know many, many thousands of your listeners and viewers have as well, where you're well paid, but you hate your job, or you hate the hate the culture.
Yeah.
There's no amount of money that can make up for that. And I do want to clarify one thing. I want to make sure that your listeners and your viewers absolutely are not taking that data point about $8,000 so that they lowball a potential. That is not where we're going here. I don't want you to think like, great, I can give people less money.
If I have, it's more that creating an amazing culture will encourage people to stay beyond the paycheck.
Absolutely. And all I was trying to do with that data point about $8,000 was illustrate that there's finally been some research that people put a price on that, that it's like, I would rather take $8,000 less and work in a good place than be more compensated and work in a miserable place. And I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Coming back to this idea of people not like you, because I think it's our kind of default nature to want to be around people who are like us. And if I think of job interviews, if I think of promotion interviews, anything that has to do with other people, it's the kind of, the thinking, and I haven't done a job interview probably in about 10 years, so maybe my thinking is out of date, but I remember at the time it was a real perception, like, would I want to go for a beer with this person? Right. Which is, this is someone I want to see outside of work. Do I like them? Do I get along with them? So talk to me a little bit more about the people that are not like us, let's say.
You're absolutely right that it is human nature for us to default to the path of least resistance, right? So when you're interviewing someone, and connecting with someone, if the connection is immediate and there and everything's clicking, it feels great. And you actually get a little dopamine hit in your brain for that, and so it feels great because it is great. There's no friction. If you say something and I'm finishing your sentence or you're finishing mine and we are on the same page, that makes everything easier, whether it's in your personal life or in your business life. And so we default to those people and situations that are highly comfortable for us. That's completely human nature. We're not bad people for doing that. That's how we're wired. But the real value can come in adding people into the mix, whether it's your employee base or even your friend base or whatever, who have different views and different perspectives, and that largely stems from different backgrounds, okay? So when I talk about people not like you, a lot of people sort of default to what I call our envelope, and the envelope is what you can see, right? You can see that I'm a very older, middle-aged woman, and you can see that I'm white, and you can see my gender and all of these things. And we see those things. How can we not? But that doesn't define who I am. What defines who I am and what defines who you are, and every single person who's viewing this podcast, is the background and experiences that we have that shape us as a human being, right? Yeah. So what businesses are realizing now is that when they diversify their teams to include different perspectives, people who have different experience, different backgrounds, they come from different perspectives, that's where the magic is. Because those perspectives become the conversations where if three people are alike in a meeting and they're all sharing ideas and they're all going, yeah, it's a great idea, let's do that or whatever, and somebody else with a different perspective goes, yeah, but what if this happens? Or, well, what if we did it this way? Or I have a concern about that. Those are the voices that we need the most around the table, because otherwise we just keep on keeping on, and we can be successful with that. We really can. We can be successful with that to a point. But that will only take us so far. It will not grow your business exponentially as if you have that other voice, that other perspective, that other person's background. That's how business grows, is when people are saying, well, what else? What else do we need to think about? What else do we need to consider? And it's hard to consider different viewpoints if they never enter your mind, because everybody has the same mindset. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And I saw something a number of years ago, and I don't know, was it a piece of research, or I don't know, was it an anecdote or something like that to explain that, where there was a group of people who physically looked different. There were different races, different genders, all of that kind of thing. Age, they all together, and you have this group of people, and then you had another group of people, and those other group of people were similar age, same gender, same ethnicity, all of that kind of thing. And the idea was that the group of people who all looked different on the outside, they actually all went to the same school. And I can't remember if they had done the same course as well. So the assumption being that, oh, you look different, so you must think differently to other people, is not necessarily the case. And the people who all look the same, they actually had vastly different backgrounds, and so brought a greater range of diverse thinking to the team. So it's not just about what you see on the outside, it's more about people's thinking and their backgrounds. And if someone came from a different industry, for example, because I know there are a lot of industries where they're like, oh, you must have experience in this industry, which I get to a point. But if you bring in people from other industries, they can bring fresh thinking. So like, you're not bringing in a whole team of people who don't have any experience in your industry.
Right.
That's crazy.
Of course.
You have to have some people with experience in the industry. But if you do bring in someone who has no experience in the industry, they bring a different perspective. They may not get how the industry works, but they can challenge how you do things as well.
And they can get up to speed on a new industry, and it's easier to do that and faster to do that than it is to try to go get different perspectives, or not. Your example of the school reminds me of a friend of mine who, in the city that he lives in, there is one really prestigious high school, okay? Mm-hmm. And like really good. I mean, the best. And when they have candidates at that company that come straight out of high school, and these are individuals who are, they've either gone to college, but they went to that high school, or they're not going to go to college and they went to that high school, but they see on their resume that they went to high school. He and I were talking about this, and I was talking about people not like you, and he was totally getting it. He said to me, wow, we have this high school and it's so well regarded that whenever we see a resume from somebody who went to that high school, we immediately say, that's our guy, or that's our person.
Wow. Yeah.
And so if we're sitting there with a stack of resumes and there's 3 or 4 people who went to different high schools, and here's the really good high school, he goes, we automatically go, that's the person that we want to talk to. That's the person that we need to hire. Yeah. Even though that person could be an idiot. I mean, just because they went to a good high school does not make them the right candidate. Yeah. And he had a real moment of reckoning with that. And he said, we've really been defaulting to this like high school thing. Yeah. And he said, we need to pull back the camera and look at the total picture. Yeah. And then just interview people for who they are, not for what school district they happen to be born into,
And did he go to that high school?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
No.
But he
and that's another
that this is wow, this is such a prestigious place. We definitely have to take everyone. And I'm from Dublin, so I can imagine that in certain places in Dublin, or if someone is hiring someone in Dublin and they went to a certain school, they would probably be like, oh, that's a good school, so we definitely
I went there too. Yeah. No, and we see that all the time where someone has, again, a really nice, what I'm going to call pedigree. Maybe they went to Harvard or Princeton or something like that, and either that becomes the whole like, ooh, top-notch school, right?
Yeah.
They must be the person that we want the most, not necessarily. Or to your point, there's a connection point between the person interviewing and they go, oh, I went to Harvard too. Or, and then it's like we default to these assumptions about that person and their background based on one connection point. And those connection points are important. I mean, I'm not saying you're a bad person if you have a conversation with someone and you found something in common there, but try to really pull back the lens and go, okay, I need to look at this person's skill set, how they conduct themselves, personality, their growth mindset, all that.
Yeah. I was going to ask, is there a way like, so I did my master's at this stage about 5 years ago now, but I was really interested in this concept of fit. And one of the concepts around fit was if you create, an organization and you hire people based on their values, you're going to get a whole load of people who are the same, which is not necessarily the case. But the big challenge within that, and within the literature as well, is this idea that we need diverse thinking. So it's not all about creating the same people again and again. It's identifying people who have different thinking to the people who already exist within the organization, to drive innovation, to be able to handle adaptability, all of those kinds of things. Are there ways to test for that?
Well, I think the conversations, if we go back to your values or whatever, and I think shared values corporately are an important thing. So, usually people's corporate values and what they want in a company and to work for, or whatever, are in line with their personal values, right? Like inclusion and respect and, things like that. So I think the values conversation is a very important one for companies to have, because you want to hire people who are like in agreement with that, which is, this is who we are as a company and a brand, and this is who we want to be. And everything that we're going to do is going to drive customer satisfaction and alignment with that. So somebody does have to be on board with that, but their perspective on those values can be different too. The way that they come to those values and the way that, they were socialized is what comes into it. In terms of interviewing for that or asking the right questions on that. I think it's about trying to draw the other person out as much as possible, and starting with things like, not just tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
Because people go into an interview with their canned, here are my 5 talking points about myself. But then leaning into almost anything that they say with, tell me more about that. Or how did that affect you? Or has that always been your approach on this? And if not, when did you modify it and why? I mean, just trying to like take the onion and peel it down a few more layers. And because otherwise everybody does go into conversations well prepared, and they have their talking points, and they will always get to them, always, right? Because that's what they prepared and that's what they want you to know. So the better conversations are the ones that try to kind of go in sideways from those things and dig deeper. And I think that's the way you get to where a person really is. And if they're uncomfortable with those questions, that's a flag, right? Because then they stuck to their prepared questions. But if I say something and you say, tell me more about that, how did that come to you? And, what did you learn from that experience? Or what was the most uncomfortable moment about that? Those are questions I'm not prepared for, and you're going to get the real in that moment.
Yeah, totally. Even if it's like, give me a second to compose.
Right. Even if it's like, my eyeballs are like this and I'm rapidly thinking and stuff like that. I mean,
yeah, but I think it's such a good point as well, because again, if I think from the interviewer's perspective, and I've been in that seat where I'm interviewing, excuse me, we're very much like, here, we want to make it as fair as possible. So it's very much like, here are the scripted questions, here are the questions associated with certain competencies, all of that kind of thing. However, I think you raise a really valid point by drilling into that to get beyond just, like you say, the scripted answers, and to get to the real person. Like, here, who are they as a person without having prepared for all of these things? Now, something else has just popped into my head with the kind of changes that I'm seeing when it comes to neurodivergence and sharing questions in advance so that people can prepare for the very specific questions that are going to be asked. But I think if we let people know as well that you could be asked to share a little bit deeper beyond what it is that this question asks of, like, how did you come to that? Or, these are the kinds of questions that could come up, so that it's, I suppose, not to exclude anyone who has problem answering those kind of questions on the spot.
One of my clients is also doing something that's interesting too, which is, in a lot of interviews, you've got this person's resume, you can see, what their key accomplishments were in their last roles. And then, instead of asking like, tell me about, one of the greatest successes that you had at your last organization, they're flipping the script on that. And they're saying, tell me about the last time at work that you failed.
I love that. Yeah.
And what that felt like for you, what you did, and what you learned. So it's not just like, tell me what failed, because it's really also easy for people to deflect that and say, well, we were doing something and then the budget got cut, right? In other words, it's not really failure. It was something external that affected the outcome. Yeah. And so they drill deeper, but they get to, how did that feel? And what did you do about that? What came next? And what did you learn from it? Yeah. And I thought those were 3 really good questions, because most people are not going to talk about feelings in an interview, but what they've learned from that is how somebody handles that adversity. And so when they say, I felt really disappointed because I put, 9 months into this project, and honestly, the outcome wasn't as expected, and it really felt demoralizing or whatever, or I felt frustrated, or I was angry, or whether they blame coworkers, you find out a lot more from the failure conversation than the successes.
Oh, that was Kelly's fault. My colleague Kelly, she messed everything up, and therefore blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, wow. Okay. So this is a person who will not accept responsibility for their role in the failure, and throwing their colleagues under the bus as well. Yeah.
And we learn so much from failure. Failure is a part of business, and not every, I was just reading some famous quotes from people who failed before they succeeded, whether it's Bill Gates or Walt Disney or Vera Wang, all these different wildly successful people. And every one of them will say, my failure led to my success, because failure is not fatal and it's not the end point. You will recover from that. And it's about how you look at that and go, okay, that didn't work. What needs to change?
Yeah.
You know, and we're still on our mission to do whatever. This particular attempt didn't work. But don't curl up into the fetal position in the corner. Pick yourself up, assess what happened, learn from it, and now keep going forward, you know. And so that tells you a lot about somebody, how somebody views themselves in the world when they fail too. You know, do they give up? I mean, that's a really important thing too, is did they give up? Do we want those people on our teams? Or did they say, you know what, we tried something, it was, it didn't turn out as expected, but it was good for us to do that. You know, we found some flaws in our system and we recognized some things after the fact. That's what it's all about.
So there's kind of three avenues that are popping up for me as we're talking about failure. One is I have the fear of failure, so I'm not even going to try something that's quite difficult. I'm going to stay in the same lane. Number two is I failed at something, and you know what? I just moved on. I didn't reflect. I just distanced myself from what happened, didn't associate myself with it at all. And then there's number three, where I failed at this thing. It was something I really wanted. And you know what? I dug in and I analysed the facts, and I realised what went wrong so I can learn for the next time, because I am surely going to do something like this or this exact same thing again. So what can I learn from this experience? So they're the kind of the three avenues. The other thing
I'd say there's a fourth.
Oh,
the fourth one would be, I would say the fourth one was, well, we were doing all of this and then blame, right? The budget got cut. You know, our lead project coordinator left on maternity leave, or, you know, whatever. I mean, it's real easy to do this. Yeah, I'd say that's a fourth lane.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Such a good point. The other aspect of failure that I wanted to talk about, that I've heard a lot about recently, is that we're often not afraid to fail, but what we are afraid of is how we'll be perceived by others if we try something and it doesn't work out. It's failing in front of other people. It's failing publicly, as opposed to just failure for failure's sake. So if I do something and no one knows that I ever tried, then it doesn't matter. But it's more, if I do something, if I declare it and it doesn't work out, or if I'm on this big project and the numbers aren't there, then that's when failure really impacts us. It's the perception that other people have of us.
And that's the culture within an organization. And Carol Dweck is very, very famous for creating the growth mindset. Yeah. And there's a lot of attributes to the growth mindset. If you look at like what the list is of, you know, the people who have a growth mindset are like this. But the number one most important attribute that they have is looking at viewing failure as learning, right? So the organizations and entities that actually embrace a growth mindset from a business standpoint are the ones that do not look at failure as, you know what, thank you, but you know what, we're going to move you to this department because, you know, being punitive or something like that with failure. That they go, okay, the outcome wasn't what we hoped for. What did we learn from that? Yeah. And that the person is not stigmatized by that, you know, the people on that project or team, that in fact the organization wraps their arm around the entire project, and including the people, and saying, okay, we tried something, and we learned from it. Now, how are we going to adapt to that learning? What are we going to do differently? Yeah. And Albert Einstein said, and I'm paraphrasing his quote or whatever, but he said something to the effect of, it's not that I'm the smartest person, it's that I sit with problems longer. Oh. And that was his MO, was just like, I can't figure this out. So I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to set it aside. I'm just going to continue to learn and to think about this and to percolate on it. And, you know, and the failure, I think, is where the real learning is. I mean, it's awesome to win, but we're not going to win every time. Yeah. And we can learn far more from our failures than we can from, I think, our successes.
Yeah. And I think we're more likely to reflect on our failures than we are our successes as well.
But the culture has to be there to support the people so they know it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
The culture really has to truly be that, as opposed to, oh, wow, okay, well, we just spent a lot of money and a lot of time on this, and really wish that you guys had done a better job. That's a scary place to be if you're an employee in an organization like that, as opposed to one that said, nothing is all for naught. Nothing is all for naught.
Yeah.
We're going to learn from every single thing, and we're going to try again. That's another part of that growth mindset, is continuous attempts to do better. Not ever giving up. Because a lot of people, when they fail, they're like, I tried that once, not doing that again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Going back to what we had said before, the ones who just kind of move on from failure, who don't even really think about it. Dare I say that the team that failed in whatever it is that they were trying to achieve, they're probably best placed to actually continue on that project, because they have all of the learnings already.
Exactly.
From what has gone wrong.
The investment is
being
there.
sidelined or moved to a different department or whatever that might be. Now, if we come back to this idea of culture and creating that culture where it's okay to fail, what do you think are the kind of the make or break? Like, what makes it different? And even if we bring that down to the individual level, because there are probably, let's face it, we're dealing with humans here. There'll be people within that organization who don't think it's okay to fail. Or, and again, we talk about this on the podcast in the past, where a lot of stuff that comes up in the workplace is from our childhood. It's stuff that triggers us, or it's stuff that we're afraid of, or whatever it might be. But there could be that coming in, like, oh, I was taught that it's not okay to fail, or to be a big boy, or a big...
Or at the last company that I worked at, if you failed, your career was over.
Hangover, that. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You're absolutely right. We're a product of our socialization, whether it's our childhood and our parenting, or whether it's the previous organizations that we've worked at, where, it was far more about success and even posturing and faking that success more than actually having success. So obviously what has to happen is that if the organization's culture is going to embrace, failure is learning, the leaders of that organization in every department, every team, have to model that behavior, and it has to be sincere. It can't be punitive. It can't be ostracizing. It can't be saying the words and, giving lip service to it and not doing it. And so the number one thing that leaders can do is go first. And by that, I mean sitting down with your team and saying, okay, we've got this big project. We've got some big goals for this year. In order to get them, we're going to have to stretch. We're going to have to really, and Carol Dweck in the growth mindset said 1/3 of the time it should feel great. 1/3 of the time it should be challenging, and you should be kind of questioning yourself and your entire approach. And 1/3 of the time it should hurt like hell, right? Whether it's because you failed or because it's just really hard, And so the best leaders are the ones that start with those conversations and say, let me tell you about a time in my career at this company or some other where I failed or we failed.
Yeah.
And what happened and what we learned from that and how important that was for our growth going forward. What did we learn from that? So leaders have to go first, and they have to actually share that they themselves have actually failed, because we all have. What we learned from it, but then also showing that vulnerability and making it okay for someone on that team to go to them later and go, I'm in that hurts like hell phase right now, and we're struggling and we're kind of at, a crossroads and we don't know what to do, because people need to know that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to admit that things aren't going very smoothly right now. And that doesn't mean it's failing. It just means that's the process. And, but the leaders have to model that, and they have to model it consistently. You can't have a kickoff team meeting and talk about failure as learning and talk about it. And then a month later, when somebody does fail, say, well, you know what, I guess Joe wasn't the right person for the task here. They have to be able to consistently show up and model that behavior, say the right words, do the right things about, like, okay, we didn't get what we thought we were going to get from this. Now what? What did we learn? How can we use that learning to apply to try again? either try again in a different way or try something else. That's all you can really do when you fail, is you can either pivot and say, okay, we're just going to go in a different direction entirely, which is a strategic decision and it's not wrong. Or we're going to try again. What did we have to modify? What do we need to modify and change? What did we learn from that?
Yeah.
The learning is where the gold is.
Yeah. And I think it's that coming back to your idea of the growth mindset and having a learning organization, as opposed to that fixed mindset where it's like, oh, that didn't work, and let's sweep that under the carpet, or let's point fingers, or whatever it might be. And I have worked in both of those different types of organizations where it's been finger pointing. We used to call it cover your arse. So everything needs to be documented, have everything on an email, because just in case something went wrong, you had to prove that you were not the person responsible. And then I've been in organizations where, it's okay, and let's learn from this. And what do we need to do differently next time? And another thing that I've learned over the years as well is that oftentimes it's not the people that fail, it's the systems and the processes that we have in place that break down in some way that causes the failure. So we blame ourselves as individuals, but actually it's the processes that we've been following.
And that's a great point. It's a fantastic point, is that maybe we didn't have quite the bandwidth that we thought. I mean that metaphorically, maybe our infrastructure, we found out we have some problems here that we've never actually realized before because we never tried this approach before. Whether it's technology or whether it's, the size of the team and the number of people working on it, maybe we're understaffed or overstaffed on that. I think that's an outstanding point, which is what from an infrastructure are some of the barriers, because that pops up all the time.
Yeah.
Look at the Taylor Swift Eras Tour when Ticketmaster was the preferred, the number one place to get those tickets. And the day that those tickets went on sale globally, crash. That was literally a technology problem that completely made the launch of that tour fail initially. Obviously they recovered, but I'm just saying, it was so bad. It was because so bad, and it cost
that magnitude before. Yeah,
correct.
And so underestimated the popularity of Swift.
Right. That had nothing to do with marketing. That had nothing to do with sales. It had to do with execution. Can we actually sell these tickets? And so that's a very good point. The other thing I want your audience to know is that the growth mindset has been proven. This is not just a theory and it's a nice little buzzword and a good concept. It's been proven that the companies that operate this way do better. It's been proven.
I love that. When it comes to individuals and the growth mindset, this is a personal perspective that I have in relation to it. Could it be the case that I have a fixed mindset in certain areas and a growth mindset in others? So if I think I'm quite good at maths, but there could be someone who's not that good at maths, and they say to themselves, I'll never be good at numbers. I'm just not good at numbers. And that's a very fixed mindset to have.
Absolutely.
But there could be other areas in my life where I'm fixed. And again, there could be other areas in their experiences where they're like, oh, actually, I didn't do that well in that, but I know that I can improve, and I'm only a beginner, and I know I can improve with time. Have you seen that kind of come to life where as an individual, I can see myself, it's basically the growth mindset is presenting itself in different ways across different aspects of what it is that we feel we're capable of doing.
Right. And absolutely, the growth mindset is the proven core is that we are not fixed, from birth or our experiences. Our talents are not fixed and therefore limited. Our abilities are not fixed, our intelligence, etc. And so the growth mindset proves and has been proven that with effort, and it starts with effort, okay, so nobody just gets an easy ride, is that we can actually improve our talents and our abilities. We can, and our intelligence, we can actually get smarter by embracing the growth mindset. So the fixed mindset is, to your point, I'm just not good at math. So if we practice math over and over and over, and we force ourselves to do more, guess what? We get better at it. I mean, it's really obvious in that example that someone who says, I'm not good at that, is going to never get good any better at it, because they're not even going to try. They're not going to put themselves in those positions where they have to do that. But the growth mindset proves that with effort and learning, so it's two things, and those are two sides of the same coin. Yeah. You don't get growth and success without the effort. The effort is imperative to results, but it doesn't mean, and I think this is an important distinction, that just because you put in the effort, you will be successful. Yeah. That doesn't mean that, because there's a lot of people who work really hard and they don't succeed. But you can't succeed without the effort, if that makes sense. You know, I think
both of those are really valid points, because I think there's this perception of overnight success with social media, with YouTube, with TikTok. People have this perception that you can just start something and be an overnight success. I think that this is the perception. But
I got discovered.
On the other hand, you can put in all this effort, but you're not guaranteed to be successful.
Of course. And I think it's important to realize on social media that people present what they want to present. They're not presenting all the failures and then going, it finally worked, right? They're going, here I am.
Yeah. You know? Overnight success. It only took
overnight success. Exactly. And there's no such thing as an overnight success. No. And, you see that certainly with like musicians who, have been around for literally decades, and all of a sudden they get one monster hit, like a really big breakthrough hit. And everybody is like, all the interviews, they're like, oh my gosh, what does it feel like to be an overnight sensation? And they're like, overnight? I've been playing in basement bars for 32 years, and I've been waiting for a break like this. This is, there's nothing overnight about it,
Exactly. Yeah. Kelly, I've so enjoyed our conversation around like failure and the growth mindset. Anything else that you wanted to add into the conversation relating to that, or relating to what we were talking about earlier in relation to people not like me?
I think, thank you. I've loved this conversation too. I think the thing that I would leave your audience with is people not like you is where the magic is. Because if you're just going to continue doing what you've always done with people like you and the challenges and issues, you can still be successful. You just won't be as successful as surrounding yourself with people who are not like you, or reaching out to the customer bases that are maybe a little different and new. But people not like you is where the magic is. And organizations have discovered this. And so that's also been proven.
I have a follow-up question now based on what you've said. And it was something that I thought about earlier as well, is if people are not like us, is there more likelihood for conflict? And how do we address that then? So if someone is like me and we get along very well, it's likely that we'll think the same things and maybe won't have that much conflict. And if someone doesn't think like me, and I'm nearly answering my own question here, because I'm like, positive conflict is so important. But what do we do to address those issues of, like, we don't automatically gel with someone, we don't automatically click with someone?
Sure.
What happens in that scenario? Yeah.
That's a very real part of working with people not like you, because, and I don't like the word conflict as much, because at work, I think it's less about conflict and more about friction.
Okay.
I don't mean to like be splitting hairs, but to me, conflict sounds more aggressive. Like we're just, we're arguing all the time. And sometimes it's not that, it's just that we don't see things the same way. And I don't really get the way that you like to work. Maybe you have a need for far greater communication than I do, and it's driving me nuts because you're sending me 30,000 emails, and I mean,
CC
but
me on everything.
So of course, if we're working with people who are not like us, there's going to be friction points just because we don't see things eye to eye. And we tend to live in our own world there and kind of go like, I can't believe you can't see it my way. What's wrong with you? So number one, expect it. It's less scary to be, to expect things and then they come to light, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in this situation with you, So expect friction, and understand too that you're not doing it wrong. There's nothing wrong with you, and it's a friction point, and it's okay. Friction is okay. You're not going to die from it. It makes it a little more uncomfortable in the moment to have those points of friction, but that's often, again, where the magic is, So lean into it as opposed to just avoiding it. And thirdly, if you don't if you just don't gel with someone because you're different, understand that you don't have to have this person over for dinner. You don't have to go on vacation with them. You just have to work with them. And the example that I'll give a lot of times at a conference is I'll pick somebody from the audience, somebody sitting in the front row or whatever, and I'll say, okay, Samantha, you and I don't like each other, okay? We just don't. We just rub each other the wrong way. It's nothing really like super personal. We've just never really gotten along all that well. And I'll say, go with me here. And I'll say, so, you don't like me and I don't like you or whatever. We're not that great. But do you think that you and I could sit down and do a budget forecast? And inevitably that person will go, yeah. And I'll say, right, because it's a task. Mm-hmm. We don't have to have feelings about it. Yeah. If I sit down with you and I'm trying to do a budget forecast for next quarter, I need your help to do that. You have the experience and we're going to, do this together. It's a task. We can sit down together. I don't have to like you to be effective in that role. So let yourself off the hook relative to that friction point, is we do have to be respectful and we do have to be professional at all times, but nowhere does it say that we have to like everybody that we're going to work with.
Yeah.
And then another big tip that I can give your audience is when you're sometimes at those friction points where you're just not getting where this person is coming from and they're saying this, that you can say, I see it differently. And I see it differently is so much better than agree to disagree. Many of us have been taught that when we don't agree, and we're not going to, that we should say, let's agree to disagree. But the problem with that is if I say that to you and you go, fine, Kelly, then this conversation is over.
Yeah.
And we didn't get anywhere, but it's over. I say, let's agree to disagree. And you go, fine. And we part ways. So I see it differently is a conversation extender. And I promise you that if I say to you, I see it differently, that you are going to say something along the lines of, well, tell me how you see it.
Yeah.
And we're going to have that conversation go a little further. And we might not still agree. Okay. But it's a neutral statement. I'm not trying to persuade you over to my point of view. I'm not arguing. I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. Nothing. It's a neutral statement of just, I see it differently. But no one is ever going to go, if I say I see it differently, you're not going to go, I don't care.
I don't care, or conversation over.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to say, I promise you, you're going to say, well, tell me how you see it.
Yeah.
And there's benefit in that. Again, we might not still agree, but you're going to understand more about what I am thinking and seeing in this process than if I just say, let's agree to disagree. We're done.
Yeah. Conversation over. Love that. Love that as an explanation. Kelly, the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, what does being happier at work mean to you?
I think being happier at work means being heard, being fulfilled, gratified with the work that you do, finding purpose in it and enjoying it. We won't always enjoy it, but generally we enjoy what we do. And being heard at work, being seen and heard and valued for the contributions that you bring to that work, because most of us bring our A game every day. So I think it's about the internal gratification that we get that is externally fueled by feedback and being heard and valued for our contributions. That's what happier at work is.
Love that. And if people want to find out more about what you do, if they want to connect with you, if they want to look into your 4 different books, what's the best way they can do that?
Well, my 4 different books are all on Amazon. And if you just put in Kelly McDonald books, they come up. And this is my #1 bestseller, How to Work with and Lead People Not Like You. So you can find me very easily on Amazon. Also, barnesandnoble.com, and also any independent booksellers. I love our independent booksellers in the world. So I got to give a shout out to them. And if they want to find out more about me, the 2 best ways, I'm on all the socials, but the 2 easiest, best ways are my website, which is mcdonaldmarketing.com, and my LinkedIn, which there's a million Kelly McDonalds out there. So I am Kelly C. McDonald. Yes, C as in Christine, Kelly C. McDonald, or you can just put in Kelly McDonald Denver and I'll come up.
Love it. Brilliant. I'll have to connect with you after this conversation.
Please.
As well. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Kelly. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I don't think it's something that we've really touched on the podcast before. So I really, really appreciate your insights. Thank you.